Благодаря.
Okay, just to check, Carol, can you see my presentation?
Yes, David, we can see that very nicely.
Lovely. Okay, right. So it's nice to be able to speak about a subject that I know a little bit about. Obviously, I haven't met most of you before, so I look forward to the time when we can all get together again and actually meet each other and discuss everything that we're going to be doing within the group and everything. So I'm really looking forward to this. Right, my talk tonight is on the iconic Vulcan Bomber. Amazing aircraft. I'm just going to go through a little bit about it and then, you know, give you some information and everything, and then we can look at the questions at the end. Right, so first of all, I'll just give you a quick resume of my military career when I was in the Royal Air Force, just so you can see what I worked on and everything else. I started in February 1977, just before my 17th birthday. Quite a daunting prospect at that age, leaving home, and I don't think it would be done so easily nowadays, but leaving home and putting yourself in the hands of a military force. After completing all my basic training and trade training, I passed out as an airframe technician. And during my career, I worked on multiple different aircraft. First one being the English Electric Lightning. This was designed in the 1940s, not long after the Second World War, and it eventually came into service around about the mid-50s. It was a twin-engined interceptor aircraft, so to try and ward off any Soviet aircraft or whatever that was coming towards British airspace. It was one of the fastest jets that the RAF have ever had. It used to go 1,500 miles an hour plus, which is around about 2,500 kilometers per hour. So it's extremely fast. So that was my first aircraft. Moving on to the next one, and I worked on the McDonnell Douglas Phantom, which is an American aircraft. Used to be a naval aircraft because the wings could fold, so it used to go on an aircraft carrier. But the RAF got them from the Navy when the Navy carriers went out of service, and we used that as again a fighter aircraft just to protect the airspace around the UK. Next one was the Blackburn Buccaneer. This was a British designed aircraft, and it was basically a low-level strike and bomber aircraft. Very, very maneuverable, but a little bit slow. That's why it obviously did low level, because it was easier for that sort of role that it had. The next one was the Panavia Tornado, which went out of service in the RAF about 4 years ago. This was the air defense variant, which was again built to ward away the Russians, from our airspace. Again, it was a tri-partnership that built this. It was the Italians, the Germans, and the British, and all three air forces had them. And I think we also sold some to Saudi Arabia as well. The next aircraft was the Eurofighter Typhoon. Again, this was a project by multiple different nations, and it's still the mainstay of the Royal Air Force at this present time, and they use it in multiple roles for air defence and also strike aircraft as well. As you can see from all the photographs, the aircraft continued to evolve with the technological developments and systems and designs. So obviously, the more, the longer we go forward, the more technological they are. Right, so this leads me on to the amazing, iconic Vulcan Bomber. Carol, I think, knows quite a lot about it, but for the people that don't, I'll give you a short history about the aircraft. It was all led in from the Air Ministry wanting a high-level multi sort of range bomber. It was in 1947 when they asked for this. They wanted it to deliver a 10,000 pound payload around about 1,700 miles away from base, anywhere in the world, but over 45,000 feet, which straight after the World War II was quite a difference in the look of the aircraft compared with the wartime aircraft. The initial designs were submitted within 4 months of this request from the Air Ministry, and the contract was eventually given to a company called Avro, which is a company just to the south of Manchester. Their lead designer, Roy Chadwick, was the actual designer of the Lancaster bomber in the Second World War. And when you look at the two designs, the design for the Lancaster bomber was only 7 years prior to the Vulcan bomber. So the difference in the state of art of the aircraft is unbelievable. But anyway, going on from that, the design was developed over a period of years, and then what they did, they built some some flying plane site, but a third less than they normally were. So I'll show you a photograph. So the smaller aircraft were the original ones that they built just for flight testing, to see how everything performed. Because when you look at everything within the Vulcan, it was totally different. We'd never flown a delta wing aircraft before, and obviously everything else was totally different, jet engines and everything. So quite a big difference to how the normal sort of design process went through. So that's as far as you go there on the thing. So there was more technological advances on the aircraft than we've ever known before, and one of the main areas was the Electro hydraulic control system. Normally on most aircraft you have a stick in the cockpit, and they used to have a mechanical control run all the way to the different surfaces on the aircraft. However, this proved to be very difficult on the Vulcan because of its size. So what they decided to do was basically have electrical input put from the stick in the cockpit, which went via cables all the way to a power flying control unit, which converted the electrical signal into hydraulic movement, which moved the surfaces. So quite at that time, that was a very advanced system, and it's similar to the systems that we use in today's aircraft, with fly-by-wire with all the computers. But obviously in them days there was no computers, so it was all done through very sort of very interesting electrical processes. Right, so I'll just go on there. So the only problem with the aircraft, because everything was done electrically, was the fact that if it ever suffered a power failure, that was going to be a major problem, because it renders the aircraft unflyable. So they actually had backup batteries, which give it a certain amount of time to get the aircraft under control. But they also had a rapid air turbine, which you could drop into the airflow, and it basically worked like a wind turbine of today, just to supply enough power to keep the main systems operating so that the actual aircraft would get back to base. So again, that was a new thing really at that time of the development stage. Right, let me just see. Sorry, I've just lost where I am now. Sorry, yep. So the first full-size version, the B1, which is the two bigger ones on that photograph, eventually flew in 1955 after, you know, a 7-year development and everything sort of. Now the pilot displayed this to the public at an air show as a sales pitch, and it showed the amazing maneuverability of the aircraft. He actually took off, went round in a circuit, came back, and actually did a barrel roll, which is unheard of in a big bomber like that. The actual aircraft was very, very maneuverable and could even take on quite a few of the fighter aircraft at the time for its maneuverability. So that's very good. So, like I say, it did its first flight in 1955, and then it eventually managed to get its airworthiness certificate in 1956, which is when it went into service with the RAF. The Vulcan took its name from the Roman god of fire and destruction. They used to call them different names of different towns in the UK, but they wanted something a little bit more ferocious, and that's where the name appeared from. So the Vulcan, along with the Valiant and the Victor, became Britain's nuclear deterrent force. You know, and basically their primary task was to carry nuclear bombs and drop them on their Soviet targets should the need ever arise. Unfortunately for all the rest of us, it never did, so that's a good thing. Next slide. So I've just finished that one, so next one again. So this is the first B1 version that was brought into the Air Force. It was painted in a white, which was supposed to be anti-flash white, basically, because obviously it was nuclear and everything, and it was going to be flying at very high levels. So it's very difficult to spot with the paint scheme that it had on it. Altogether, there was 136 Vulcans built over the time, and majority of them were the B2 version. So I'll just show you the B2 version now. As you can see, if I go back to the other one, but you can actually see the shape of the wings is slightly different. And there's a bigger pod behind the tail. It had upgraded engines, and it also had a air-to-air refueling, which you can't quite see on this photograph. But again, these are all, you know, improvements on the original B1 version. It had better electro countermeasures, so jamming signals and things like that would be in order for it to reach its target should it ever need to. Right, so I'll leave you to look at this slide very quickly, but it just shows a few facts of the Vulcan. The next to last one's quite interesting. It could actually carry enough fuel to power a Nissan micro motor car for 48 years at 10,000 miles a year, and that's just in one journey. So it's 30,000 gallons it used to take in the aircraft. So that's quite a lot of fuel. Makes you wonder nowadays, but obviously with all the green side of things now, we can't do that. But there's quite a few facts on there, and like I say, it was an amazing aircraft. Right, so next one. So as you can see, 136 built, and it was powered by 4 Rolls-Royce Olympus engines, giving 54,000 pounds of thrust, which is extremely powerful, and it needed it to get off the ground. But obviously very, very high levels of lift on the wings, but it still needed the power because it was 100 feet long and about 100 feet wide, which are 33 meters basically, which is quite sizable. Go to the next slide. So in the aircraft, you had a 5-man crew. The captain who sat on the left, the co-pilot sat on the right, and then the air electronics officer, the navigation plotter, and the navigation radar officer. wasn't a very good setup as far as the crew was concerned. The two pilots sat on ejection seats. You can just see the handles in the green, yellow and black at the front of the seats. So if there was ever an emergency, they could quite easily pull those, it'd blow the canopy off, and away they'd go very safely. Now, unfortunately, the other three members of the crew were seated slightly lower in the aircraft and behind the pilots, and their access was extremely limited in emergencies. So I'll show you the next one. And basically, this is the entrance, but also the exit from the aircraft. But the three crew members would have to come down the top ladder and then open the door, then climb down the other ladder on the steps, and then throw themselves clear of the aircraft and pull the parachutes. And like I said, very, very difficult. And I should imagine if the aircraft's in trouble, you're going to be thrown all over the place trying to do that. And unfortunately, there were 15 crashes where the Vulcan, never made it again. And out of those crashes, only five lots of the three people ever got out. So 30 of the others obviously got killed, which is not very good. Right, so next one. So there you can see the bomb bay. So at the height of the Cold War, there were 6 bases, 5 in England and 1 in Cyprus. All had to have 2 fully armed aircraft ready to go at a moment's notice. And this was called QRA, which is Quick Reaction Alert. It was a duty that all ground crews and air crews had to do. And the requirement from the Air Force was that they could get the aircraft in the air within 2 minutes, which is very unusual nowadays. But they had to fit a specialized rapid start system, because the normal starting process for a Vulcan was probably about 15, 20 minutes. Now, everything was set ready to go. All they had to do was start the engine. So they just pressed this rapid start button, and it actually used 4 compressed air tanks to start the engines, which got the engines running all together and started up all the flying controls and the instrument gyros. And that enabled it then to taxi to the end of the runway and just go straight off. So nuclear deterrent. So obviously they were the UK's nuclear deterrent. Unfortunately, like we say, they never got involved in delivering their nuclear weapons, which for the world is a very good thing. So in 1969, their role was finished, and the Royal Navy took over the nuclear deterrent with the Polaris submarines, which then really left the V-Force no longer, with their original duties. So the Vulcans were retrofitted again back to conventional bombers, and the other 2 V-Force aircraft, one turned into a air-to-air refueler, and the other one just got scrapped because there was having problems with the wings anyway. As far as combat missions, there was only ever 6 combat missions by a Vulcan bomber, and they were all in the Falkland Islands in 1982. They flew all the way from the UK to the Falkland Islands, which is about 7,500 miles each way, and they delivered their bombs. One aircraft attacked the airfield, and the other bombers attacked different other air defense radar systems and everything that the Argentinians had set up. It only actually hit the runway with 1 out of 12 bombs, which not a very good accurate finish to the actual combat mission. However, it did stop the Argentinians using the runway for a fair amount of time, which then enabled the British forces to overcome them. So that was from the Falkland Islands. The other thing that they did, because they did fly very high, they used to go over to America and test the air defense systems in America. At that time, flying at 60,000 feet, the radar wasn't that effective. So we constantly sent aircraft over to try and test the American defences and see if they could catch us out and, you know, sort that out. Now, one story came to mind, was one of the Vulcans went over, flying over New York one day, and he took photographs of New York City below him. The MOD sent the photographic evidence over to the Americans, and the Americans, being cocky as they normally are, sent the photographs back of their aircraft above the Vulcan, taking the photographs of the Vulcan, taking photographs of New York. So once we got that back, then Britain sent out another set of photographs with another aircraft above their aircraft, above the Vulcan, above New York, and we never got a reply back for that. So obviously that didn't go too well with the Americans. So that's basically the combat history. Really, it was very, very little, but that's what we want, really, isn't it? With less combat, the better. All right. So next one. Right. So. That one. So obviously all those extra missions were carried out. Now in 1984 they retired the Vulcan from service, but they did keep one aircraft on, which was tail number XH558, and they kept it on purely to do air displays for the public and for other manufacturers, etc. Now this unfortunately finished in 1992 because it was just costing too much money, and that particular aircraft that they kept was then sold to a businessman. A few years later, in 1999, he decided that he would like to plan and try and get the aircraft back into the air, because everybody was moaning about it and saying that they miss it from the skies above the UK. So they went through a series of planning issues and trying to get the financial support together, because it was going to cost something in the region of about £5 million a year to get it flying. And after a few setbacks, they finally got the restoration started in 2005. They had to completely strip every component out of the aircraft one at a time, examine it, check it if it was working. If it was repairable, they could repair it. If it wasn't, then they'd have to replace it. And obviously trying to get replacements weren't going to be very easy, because obviously they didn't manufacture them anymore. So that was one issue. But eventually, 2007, they managed to get it up in the air and did a few test flights, and everything performed very well. They finally got the license from the Civilian Aviation Authority, and everything went well. And in 2008, they started flying again for air shows in the UK. This was great. The crowds loved to see it all coming back again. And this continued for 7 years till 2015, but eventually the costs got on top of it, and the Civilian Aviation Authority removed its airworthiness certificate, so it could not fly anymore. So on its last trip, it did a 1,000-mile round trip around the UK, going over like the Forth Road Bridge in Edinburgh and through the Lake District. It flew over Woodford, where it was originally built, and then landed at Doncaster at the Robin Hood Airport there, and that's where it remains today in its own hangar, as you can see in the left-hand photograph. So yeah, so all that was thrown together, so it was really, really good. And like I say, everybody enjoyed it. And this, if you ever get the chance, if it interests you, there's lots of videos on YouTube about the Vulcan and everything, and the sound of it and everything. It's an amazing sound. It's got a howling sound at a certain engine speed where it's taking the air into the intakes. But my part of working on this aircraft was just as the Falkland Island War started. I only worked on it for probably 2 months, and I was involved with retrofitting all the bomb bays, reinstalling some of the air refueling system, because it hadn't been used for many years. So because it was never needed, because obviously they didn't have to go any further out of the country. So that was never used. So we had to upgrade all those systems. It was an amazing aircraft. It was a bit awkward to work on, even though you see it's so big, but there was a lot of small little places that you had to crawl into to get to certain equipment and things like that. So it wasn't easy to work on. And when you jacked it up, as in the one in the photograph, it used to take about 3 hours just to jack it up off the ground. You had 4 big jacks, and then you had to put lots of plinths in as well to protect it from moving when everybody was working on it. But that was my basic working life on the Vulcan. But I have witnessed it flying many, many times, and it's an absolute beauty in the sky with the design it's got and everything. So that basically leads me to the end of my presentation. So if anybody's got any questions.
First of all, thank you very much, David, for this very nice presentation. I agree with you. It's one, if not the most beautiful military airplane ever built, in fact. Are there any questions from anyone?
No, thank you. It was very good.
I think that this design of this plane is made first time on a piece of paper from English engineer during the Second War.
Also, German engineers worked in a similar
Yes.
way.
This is the first plane with one.
David, can you explain maybe to everyone why the Delta shape was chosen?
Well, sorry, yeah, the original intentions, really. I mean, obviously, like you said, the Germans had tried to develop a delta wing towards the tail end of the Second World War. But the thing is, because of the amount of load that it has to carry with the bomb and the distance and the altitude and everything, it was a lot easier to give it the delta wings because it gives it more lift. So the higher you go, the more lift you need, but then you need less power as well. So it was all to do with the distances that it needed to travel. So it got more lift, but less fuel. So then that allowed it to give it a longer range. So that was the main reason why they went for it. But obviously, again, it took quite a while getting to develop it because of the fact that nobody had ever used that sort of design before.
Yeah. Okay.
The bomber, as a bomber, it has a very high speed.
Yeah, it's almost 2.5 Mach.
2.5.
Yeah, it's very fast, very fast. From the other members, any questions or comments?
Thank you very much, David.
No, that's fine.
It was a very good presentation.
Thank you.
I like it.
Very good, thank you.
Thank you very much, David.
Thank you very much.